Michal Bar-Asher Siegal, Vice President for Global Engagement at Ben-Gurion University. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So you've been outspoken in your fight against academic boycotts against Israel. I don't know if you've heard, but actually Rutgers University today is having a discussion with its union about potential academic boycotts against Tel Aviv University, for example. But what, in short, are your main arguments on the subject?
Honestly, even if you have criticism of Israel or Israel's engagement in Gaza or Israel policy, boycotting academia is probably the stupidest thing or the worst thing you can do to fight Israeli policy in Gaza and Lebanon for the very simple reason. The academia is the place for freedom of speech, of multi-vocality. We have Palestinian and Arab students sitting side by side, Israeli students. The real conversation is taking place in academic campuses. Mm-hmm. Boycotting us is actually fighting the voice of, criticism or speech or the dialogue over Israel's policies is happening in Israeli academia. So even if you are a critic of Israel's, the last thing you need to do is basically boycott academic institution in Israel. In addition to that, Israeli institutions in Israel are the way forward. They're the future. This is where excellence happens. This is where the state of Israel develops its newest tools and research we're known for our excellence around the world. And boycotting Israeli academia is hurting Israel in all of the ways possible. And even if you just want to criticize a certain part of Israel's policies, that's not the way to go. Right. We are not our government, we have a lot of voices and we are actually the way forward.
Yeah, I think that in general, something that's really problematic in the movement within boycotting Israel is the kind of misdirected efforts that seem to be constantly used, and it's alienating Jewish and Israeli students abroad, for example. So tell us a bit about the international programs that Ben-Gurion University offers that would be relevant to such students that are feeling alienated.
The situation on campuses is very difficult. Yes. I actually experienced it personally when I was asked to be vice president. Before the war, I was actually a visiting professor at Yale. And I said, I was just invited to be a visiting professor at Harvard Law School. I'll do that and then I'll come back and be the vice president for global engagement, for international collaboration and bringing Ben-Gurion forward and creating all those wonderful international programs. And then when the massacre happened on October 7th and the war that started afterwards, I was at Harvard teaching. And what I experienced was shocking to me. I had to go teach, on October 8th, on October 9th, and go through hundreds of protests yelling "Free Palestine" from the river to the sea. There were still, there were still bodies in the street in Israel. I had to get myself up from bed and go teach and pass through such hatred of Israel. And the conversation turned to the right of Israel to exist. And antisemitism was so prevalent. I had to say, it really shocked me. I was completely caught off guard. I was saddened and shocked like everyone. And then having to deal with this on campus. And, I came back, and, at the end of my semester, I came back to Israel with my family. But my Jewish students that were on campus experienced, I would never forget seeing them and talking to them while this was happening and their fellow mates in class. So Ben-Gurion is a very good option for students such as this. We offer a variety of international programs for graduate students, for master's programs, for graduate postdocs. We have small, short-term. We have a full degree in sustainability at Sde Boker. You can come and study at Eilat campus and swim with dolphin. You can come at Sde Boker and learn about solar energy, and you can study about
Ben-Gurion.
And Ben-Gurion, obviously at Moreshet Ben-Gurion, and obviously Ben-Gurion campus at Be'er Sheva, which is the best campus Israel has to offer. And Ben-Gurion's policy is we don't have separate programs for international students. Our entire international program is completely integrated with Israeli students. You come to us, you study in class next to Israeli students, you study with them side by side. This is our policy, our ideology. And it's a wonderful campus. We're a sense of a community, I think, after October 7th. It's very obvious and very clear. Sense of a community and its very, essence, and it's fun, and interesting, and we have a
And
variety of
these
programs.
classes are accessible to Olim Chadashim who don't necessarily have the best Hebrew?
We teach all of the classes. Once a student come in and he needs English, the class is taught in English. So we have a lot of classes taught in English. We have programs such as an MBA in business. And it is taught in English for Israeli students and international students. The entire degree is taught in English. Our Stabekar campus is completely English. So we have a lot of English options. And we have obviously an Ulpan as well. But this is the essence of English and, international and Israeli students studying side by side.
So I'm curious because you come from a Jewish studies background, professionally and academically speaking. So what research questions have emerged for you specifically because of your moving to and from Israel?
So I'm a professor of rabbinic Judaism. I studied Jews and Christians in the first century CE, especially in a text called the Babylonian Talmud. But I look at really the birthplace of Judaism and Christianity side by side and what makes our culture what it is until today, the Jewish culture in its roots. We were talking about me teaching at Harvard Law School. Well, this was happening. I was teaching about law between Jews and Christians in those first centuries and how this what we call interreligious dialogue, how those two groups that, suffered from massacres and persecution over the centuries, and how those two religious groups lived side by side. And we have the leaders calling for separation and we have the people on the ground living side by side. We have, Christians in the 4th century fasting on Yom Kippur, and we have Jews, looking at some theological concept in Christianity and saying, oh, that might work for us. So the complexity of interreligious dialogue, and I was teaching that while my country, my family, my friend, my community was suffering from a different interreligious, conflict that was happening on the ground. So it's directly linked. And I always say, this is what people should study. They should study our roots and religious studies as a whole because it's directly connected to what's happening now. We have to learn how history overcome it, how we managed to live through history through religious strife and conflict, and how we made it work in previous centuries and try to learn lessons from the horrible, horrible period we're living through.
Right. I mean, I think since the dawn of Judaism, we've experienced antisemitism and certain tools might allow us to overcome the same challenges repeated again and again. But nevertheless, BDS is a completely different angle of that same hatred. You've spoken with many academics abroad and encountered BDS within your professional sphere consistently, as you mentioned. What are some of the biggest misrepresentations you've seen of Israel within academia?
So I think that's the thing that saddened me the most, because a lot of the criticism and the call for BDS comes from the humanities. This is in social sciences. This is my field of study. I sit within those people and gender studies and feminism. And I was so saddened and surprised, I have to say, by the simplistic approach for bad and good and evil, and the strong ones, David and Goliath, and how easily and how fast Hamas received support. And I have to say, my biggest misconception is how they switched from criticism of the occupation, which is one thing, to talking about Israel's rights to exist. I have to say, I come from this milieu, and I was shocked by how quickly the conversation turned to Israel's even right to exist and the simplicity of it. And honestly, people don't even know which river and sea, what are we talking about? And 47 and the UN resolution concerning Israel, none of it comes into play. And I think it has to do with a lot of other issues and a lot of, colonialism criticism that might apply in certain ways, but definitely not in the way that it's being applied today. I have no doubt in my mind that there's something that happening besides that in the minds of the people, a lot of antisemitism and a lot of, self-hate from other cultures that is being projected on us. Right. But it shouldn't happen, especially not in academic circles. This is, even again, you can criticize Israel policies in certain angles, occupation and all kinds of stuff. This cannot lead to a conversation. How come the conversation all of a sudden is about Israel's right to exist?
Right. It's an oversimplification born of misinformation.
Ignorance. We should really say it. Ignorance. And we as academic should know better. Really, we should know better. And it really angers me. And for the first time in my life, I block people on social media, people who are my colleagues, because I said, this is not, you should know better. And it really angers and saddens me. I am still a very firm believer in knowledge and education and teaching people what there is. And I have to tell you, we hear the loud voices, and I think they're still the minority within academia. The vast majority of people I know who know our research, know that it's good research, want to continue working with us, they're silent at the moment. And they're I think they're also scared by the vehemence and the antisemitism that rises, the support in Hamas, a terrorist, and the atrocities of October 7th. I think the vast majority of people are with us, but we should be better at teaching and educating people about the complexity of the situation here on the ground.
Absolutely. Yes. Michal, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.